Hi everyone, welcome to Cow Corner Cricket Cast. I'm your host Pratham. I'm joined by my mate Rohan, and today we're going to be discussing the first test of arguably the most important or exciting, so the Australian and English thing, of all test contests, that being the Ashes. And we had one. It was at the Gabonado, as Shane Warne would call it, in Brisbane. This Australian cycle of the Ashes in 2021. And Rowan, I just want to start off by saying, I think England have shown a great deal of improvement, a great deal of resolve, a great deal of fight. They came here last time in Australia to the Ashes. They lost by 10 wickets, and they've really improved, man. They really have. They've lost by 9 wickets.
All we need to know is that in 36 years, they'll finally win a match, or at least draw one.
Yeah, they'll win it by 1 wicket. It's an incremental cycle.
Oh, in that case, it'll be 40 years because. Is there anything more depressing than English cricket played down under? Like, as
Pakistani cricket played down under.
Well, that's just Pakistan. We don't know if they're gonna win or lose, but we know they'll be entertaining. At least Pakistan, when they lose big. So it's like, oh yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, with English cricket, it's the same rule.
English cricket is a closed time loop. Personally, I believe this is because they sacked everyone involved with the body line, and this is cricket's karma for doing that. They're like, no, you can't. Why would you do that? That makes no sense.
The ghost of Harold Arwood is coming through the shadows and being like, now you will lose the Ashes.
I have taken my knowledge and passed it on to the Australians, and now the Australians will use my knowledge to defeat the English.
All jokes apart, let's get started talking about this match. Because it was a one-note match, but there were some exciting moments, and nothing more so exciting than the pitch. A first in a long while at the Gabba. I haven't seen a wicket this verdant in a decade, really, which should tell you something. They played a lot of matches on this ground. It's a home fortress of Australia, but this wicket was a bit different. As I said, there was a lot of live green grass that was evenly dispersed throughout the playing surface. And what that essentially meant, right, because it was the even dispersion and so forth, was that the wicket was going to be bound together pretty firmly. There was a bit of moisture. There was because there was 2 weeks of rain that led up to the test, and so that seemed to have seeped into the wicket as well. And then on the first morning, in fact, you had these really cloud-filled, steely silver skies that were present in that initial morning. So all that really suggested to me, Rowan, was that this wicket first up was going to be where the quicks were going to get some seam and swing movement, as well as some bounce and pace, but also be one, critically, that wouldn't break up over the course of the 5 days, right? And so you would get a cricket wicket that would start out a little bit spicy, but really would be one that could last the distance, which is what you really want in a test wicket. It wasn't just that. The nature of the wicket, right, because it was slightly uneven, the moisture that was present, there were some dry patches, the naked eye that you could see that were drier than obviously some of the greener grass, more moisture-filled ones. That suggested that as the pitch was going to bake or dry out in the hot sun, as we sort of anticipated by the weather by day 2 onwards, that you were going to essentially see a pitch where you were going to get some inconsistent bounce. Also because as the moisture dries out, right, and the ball hits the soft parts of the ground, softer, I should say, parts of the ground initially, right, it creates divots in the pitch from the place where the ball comes through. And so effectively when it dries up and hardens up, you get those spots which, react unpredictably, either bounce a lot or bounce a little bit lower. And so you could see, based off the initial signs, that there was going to be some inconsistent bounce that was going to continue on with the game, as well as some turn because of that same moisture reason. Have moisture on the wicket and it dries out a little bit. Generally, you tend to see a little bit of turn that assembles as well. After that drying out process. So it wasn't just that it was going to be tough for the side batting first. if you want to put it in that way, right? There was also going to be a trouble for the side that was going to bat fourth, ideally. So really, at the start of the play, Joe Root, because it wasn't a clear-cut decision, I feel, from just the aspects related to the pitch and the overhead conditions, to make a decision on whether he wanted to bat first. When he won the toss, he made that difficult decision to bat first.
In part, I think that English captains are a little bit hesitant to bowl first on the Gabba.
Yeah.
Because, Nasser's comments about...
We'll have a bowl first.
We'll have a bowl, please.
Yeah, and 364 for 2. Yeah, great start. But it's actually good that you brought that up, right? Because I thought a lot of people were insanely critical of Root for, not choosing the bowl first.
I don't blame him in the sense, I think that in a vacuum, the decision, personally as a captain, I would always choose to bat first. It doesn't matter the conditions. In a test match, that's what I would do because the numbers don't lie. It's easier to bat sessions 1 and 3 than it is to do 2 and 4. Just is, right? Even if session 1 is not session 1, like innings.
Innings,
yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because in the first session might be difficult, but by the third session, the pitch should have flattened out. It should be a good time to bat pretty much anywhere in the world.
And the fourth innings,
you don't want to. No one likes batting, trying to win a match in the fourth innings.
Yeah, there's just added pressure on chasing the target, and there's also just material. Now, this was a little bit different, but again, you couldn't say that absolutely for certain, right? So I don't blame him nearly as much.
It was. If you're just looking at the numbers, it's the right choice. But if you look at your team,
yes,
is what you're trying to get to, and I agree with that as well, which is that England is a worse team, so in that case you kind of are in a position where you have to choose the alternative strategy, which is to bowl first.
Yeah, because I don't know if you know this, Ron. England don't really have a very good batting line anymore in the world.
They have one good batsman and then a couple of other talented guys that could do something maybe.
Yeah, who half perform. And then Ben Stokes is recovering from, a break from the game. So there's no guarantee on how he's going to do. That's the first reason why I think.
Also, if there's conditions in which English seamers might have an effect, it's on a green wicket with clouds on it.
Yeah. Even though this wicket wasn't as green as some people would say it is, it's still...
No, it wasn't super green. It wasn't like a green wicket in like South Africa or something, where just like you cannot tell the difference between the wicket and the square. You're just like, well, I guess that's the wicket.
Yeah, but there was assistance in terms of lateral movement for England's slightly slower pacer than average than Australia, right? So there would have been a good decision in that context. But then the other thing also, not related to the pitch at all, right? Which I think everybody's missing out as to why I think Joe Root should have probably chosen the bowl first. The outfield, man. People underrate the importance of an outfield in a context of a match, but very often an outfield can be critical in saving you up to like 50 or 60 runs in the first innings in terms of a deficit, right? It can go as far as that. And the reason why I think it would have been a good decision here, keeping in mind of the outfield to do that, was because of the amount of rain that we've had over the 2 weeks leading up to this test, thunderstorms and all. You had a situation here where you knew that the outfield was going to be on the slower side, because of the amount of rain that went through, right? And so, if you were to play shots, right, if you get, try to get boundaries on the ground and all those sort of things, or even hit the ball up in the air and it landed, it wouldn't necessarily carry to the fence in the first day. And the Gabba has really good drainage systems, though. So by the time of the second day, effectively, right, when there was less rain anticipated and all that, the drainage systems would probably be able to sort that out.
Relatively easily.
Yeah, to a much better degree, and we saw that, right, in the context of the match. There were some shots that, Butler, for example, played 1-3 where he hit it, where similar shots by Travis Head with similar powers, not particularly authoritative, would rocket it to the fence as opposed to the ones which just stop short of it. And so I think with both of those facets combined, right, I think it was the wrong decision. Having said that, it still wasn't a apocalyptic decision. It still wasn't a terrible decision, but the English batsman made it look like it was a terrible decision. That's the part we have to kind of get to, because the first innings, right? The first ball sets the tone. I always feel the first ball that you play internationals, right, especially in Australia, just historically has set the tone on how the day's play is going to go on, and often how the match is going to go on, sometimes even how the series goes. And that first ball, Rory Burns, yes, he's in his first tour to Australia. He's facing a quality attack in conditions that seem friendly to an extent. The expectations aren't high for him to do well, but the way he played that first delivery, right, it really summed up, somewhat unintentionally, really summed up the shambolic batting display of England in that first inning. Because what he did was, he essentially walked all the way towards off stump, where the ball would be outside of his eye line, right? And he, was trying to play
completely fooled.
Yeah, he got fooled by the swing, admittedly, but it was a leg stump half ball, right?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that he got completely fooled into overreacting to the ball. He lost his off stump and then lost his leg stump.
Yeah, he lost where his off stump was. Versus, it's just like some. I completely agree. And Starc getting that first wicket, got a lot of criticism leading up to the match, about his performances and so forth. Put that to bed a little bit in that first innings.
Three Australian seamers bowled really well to start off the innings.
They all bowled well, but as well as they bowled, right, and it does have to be said, there was some pretty bad batting that was kind of helpful to them, right? A good example of this is David Milan, that first innings, right? There's a ball that bounces that was so short, right, that he didn't have to play at, that if you put another set of stumps in front of the existing stumps, that's how much effectively it bounced, right? So he could have left it, but then he chose to play at it when he got out, right? Yep. Josh Butler, there was a good delivery to him, but
honestly, I don't really blame Josh Butler. I think that in context of the innings, he kind of needed to do what he did.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. I just think that the way that his dismissal,
the way he got out was kind of stupid. But again, it's Josh Butler.
Yeah,
it's what he does.
Yeah.
He will play glorious shots and then immediately play the dumbest shot imaginable and get out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good delivery, to be fair. It swung back in from Starc and all. It was just that, again, it was a delivery that was short and was not going to hit the stumps, and it wasn't really going to threaten him that much. He didn't have to play at it, right? Here's the point. He could have left it, and he played at it, nicked it, feathered it with thin edge, completely accepted by the keeper. So, just there was some batting there where it's just like, you've got to understand that in Australia, you can leave the ball. The bounce is such where you can leave the ball. And that's it.
Unless it's like the SCG or MCG, in which case you don't need to worry about bounce. Just hit the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't apply to every Australian, but on the Gabba especially. Right?
Yeah, in the Gabba, the leave is your best friend.
You mentioned that poor extent of batting from the English, some of the batsmen. We do have to give credit to really some excellent bowling spells from the Australians, and in particular the captain, the first-time captain, mind you, first test that he's playing, Pat Cummins.
Career match that he's captaining.
Yeah. In
a professional career, which is incredible.
Yeah. And it comes in, circumstances that could have been shaky mentally, right? Tim Payne with all of his scandals, the scandal that he had to force to step down, being an new actor.
Steve Smith, David Warner, for some reason being banned for life from captaincy.
Yeah.
Inexplicably.
Yeah, I mean, it was very important for him to lead from the front, right? And so it was very admirable on that first day. Yes, the conditions were a little bit helpful. Yes, the batting was not the best, but he bowled brilliantly, and he would probably taken a 5 for any of the people that were Pat Cummins, the new captain. And regarding Pat Cummins, right, there were just so many things that, not only from a bowler's perspective, the couple of things from a bowler's perspective that he did brilliantly, but also from a tactical captaincy perspective that he just did superbly. A couple of things that I just noticed in that first game were so good, right? As a bowler, he worked the crease really well. Sometimes he was bowling midway, in the crease, and then sometimes a bit wider. And so he did that with Hamid in particular, right? So Hamid was the one English batsman who we felt was batting pretty solidly at that point. And he essentially forced him to play at one because he went wider of the crease. So the ball looked like it was coming in he forced him to play at one that was actually a little bit wider of the stumps, which he didn't have to play at. So that was excellent bowling, just straight up brilliant bowling. And then, he also just bowled brilliantly against Stokes as well. Bowled a lovely spell, set him up, and then bowled a Jaffa that bounced on him and, basically got him out, right? But then he also had bowling changes that just were very well reasoned out, right? So he, that Stokes dismissal that I was talking about, he specifically brought himself on to target Stokes in a spell. And then he also did the same with Root in a spell, right?
Yeah.
And both of those, the significance of that can't be understated. Stokes and Root are basically the two quality English batsmen consistently in this lineup, right? They are the inspiring presences of the team. They're the ones that the team effectively considers in all conditions are the ones who they think they can score. And so it was a matchup that he specifically, went after, right? He was like, I'm going to take the captain down. I'm going to take this great all-rounder who is basically the senior man down, right? And kudos to him, because that's a sort of awareness that you need to have as a bowling captain, in particular, to take down a particular batsman who you think is problematic. And so, I thought just
and as I mentioned earlier, I thought that the decision to bring on Cam Green to take on a dangerous-looking Ollie Pope and set that field to get him to do this, to play the stupid shot to get himself out was... Yeah,
because what he did, right, was he had a deep fine leg or a long leg stationed at every given time. And even when Green was bowling, backward length stuff or good length stuff, right, he kept that field out. And eventually, he had Green bowl slightly a bit shorter. Pope, who had been batting pretty well at that point, 35, Pope wasn't able to control it, bounce, and Hazelwood took
he got himself out.
Yeah. So, again, good captaincy on that front. Again, another piece of good captaincy. He brought Starc on because he sensed that Butler was getting comfortable against Lions off spin and in Hazelwood in particular. And so he
on the left armor to give Josh some trouble, and he gets him out. And really, you can look at the Australian bowling attack, and it was generally really, really good.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll give him credit for as well, right? With and this is applicable to all the Australian attacks. Yes, they were getting wickets, and so they were allowed to have a little bit more of an aggressive field set. But even with that Butler-Pope partnership, right? Butler started playing pretty expansively. He was scoring at a pretty good clip. Pope plays shots as well and scores a decent clip as well. It would have been very easy for him to be like, okay, you know what? These guys are starting to build a partnership.
Play more defensively.
Yeah, he didn't. He kept fielders up.
And credit to him, even before that, during the Sieb and Pope partnership, again, they played pretty well together. They were building something. Sieb gets out, obviously.
Yeah.
Because of Cummins. But again, he kept his slips in. He kept his field up. He looked to try and take wickets, and it worked.
Yeah, no, and there's not much you can ask from him as a captain apart from that. So I thought wonderful performance from him, well-deserved fifer. Australia well-deserved to bowl out England for 150, and England being that shambolic, right, it was always going to be hard for them second innings come around where their bowlers going to face a battle, try to restrict Australia to as low of a total as possible to have a potential chance in this match. The match at that point already seemed like it wasn't going to be won by England, but at best they could do damage control effectively and show some fight.
Honestly, they start off looking like they're showing some fight, and they get a wicket for almost nothing.
Marcus Harris, who the Twitter already told me, Rowan, out of all openers who have played more than 20 innings in world cricket, there are 223 of them. He averages 223rd, so kind of an easy.
It's not even like he's like a bad batsman. It's more that he has an unfortunate knack of getting just like unplayable deliveries.
He kind of does, honestly. I feel for him. But no, they got him out early, and England would have been looking to get more wickets earlier on. But then,
and by the way, that opening spell was excellent from Robinson and Wokes and Wood. England's bowling is not the problem here at this point. It becomes a problem.
Yeah.
But at this point in the match, it is not the problem.
It really isn't. Although the problem early on in the match, now talking about where the problem starts, is when Warner and Marnus put up that 150 partnership not very long after. And the catalyst for that really is Jack Leach's entry into the attack, right? Because English teamers, they've been troubling them a little bit. Warner's been getting a bit lucky, edging it around. All of this, they're not looking as comfortable as possible. But then Leach gets introduced, gets stomped for 32 off his 3 overs.
And I just want to make sure that people understand, we are not piling in on Jack Leach.
No, absolutely
We have been consistent big fans of Jack Leach on this channel, and we continue to be big fans of Jack Leach.
And the reason why we continue to be big fans of Jack Leach is, yes, he didn't bowl particularly well today, but a couple of things. A, England, as usual, not deciding to play the spinner and give him any match practice whatsoever. So he comes into Gabba on a day 2 wicket here, which is is probably turning the least amount in the entire match. He's given a field from Joe Root. I remember seeing this.
By the way, I consider that field to be the dumbest field set by Joe Root this calendar year. Like, there are dumb fields. There are dumb fields set by Joe Root. Then there are and then there's that field. Yeah,
because guys, what it was, right? He had a leg slip. He had a couple of fielders on the close-in catching field on the leg side, right? 3 fielders in that area. Then he had a mid-on, right? And no close-in catching fielders effectively.
On the offside.
On the offside, right?
Right, and no slip, no silly point, no nothing.
Yeah, and so what that did, right, was that if the bowler was supposed to bowl well on that line, it's already a difficult field to bowl. Because you don't have protection on long on, which is the one aggressive shot that they can look to play on you. And the Aussies were going to come after Leach. It was pretty much known before even the match that
and you didn't have protection at slip. You didn't have that threat of the batsman. If I nick the ball, it'll go. And David Warner exploited this in particular.
Yeah, he was getting shots down the third man. He was cutting, all those sorts of things. But in those first 3 overs in particular, right? The reason why that field was so terrible was also because of the line that it seemed like Root encouraged him to bowl. Right, the line that Leach was essentially bowling was a middle to leg stump line, which is a very negative line. And the idea would have been, the close-in fielders would prevent them from hitting on the onside. But as we said, right, the problem is if you're going to have those fielders with those lines, if you have your mid-on up, right, it is an invitation for the likes of Warner and Root, especially because they didn't have too many deep fielders anyways in that mid-wicket area, to just go and tonk him straight or slightly leg side on the onside, right? And that's what Warner and Marnus did effectively, really well.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, you have to have adequate protection, and B, you have to make sensible fields, right?
Yeah,
you can't protect everything.
Yeah, and so it was really disappointing to see, quite frankly, and it really had an effect on Leach after that, right? He started bowling.
You could see it. You could physically see it. He was just out of the match.
Yeah, I mean, he was at the stage which Moeen was in the 2017-2018 action, where it was just a matter of landing it, right? You almost felt like with Leach, it was like land it. And if you're only thinking about landing the particular ball, you're not thinking about trying to get the batsman out or changing your release points, or you're varying your angles.
Or rolling a variation, or pitching it up faster, or slowing it down, tossing it up.
Yeah. You're going to be, pretty much slaughtered when they're going after you. And it happened. He went for 100 runs in, 13 overs or something.
But he did take one big wicket.
I will say that. Who was going after him. And it was a decent delivery in the sense that it bounced more than expected. Marnus went for the cut.
And to help Jack Leach out a little bit more, it went to the one English fielder who was consistently taking his catches, which was Mark Wood, which is...
Yeah, when the guy who's your fast bowler, who's probably is taking the most amount of catches, that really does say something about your standards of fielding, because that's the other thing we have to come to, which really allowed Australia to be a little bit off the hook initially. The slip catching and just the catching in general.
I would add on to that a little bit, not just slip catching and catching in general. Their field play was poor. They had 4 run-out opportunities in this match. Like 4 clear-cut. Almost any team would make that. Like, would make at least 2 of them.
Yeah,
right?
The Hamid one was a very good example of that.
Yeah, there was Hamid had 3.
And
you can forgive like one or two, right? They're like, he's running in, he's picking and throwing. Okay, that's you might miss, right? One, he's like 5 feet away. he just needs to get the ball to the stumps. He can roll it, he can throw it. It doesn't matter. Just get it to the stumps.
Yeah,
and he misses.
And he misses. Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, you as a team, and this has been, and as you'll go into with obviously the catching, this has been a problem for England for at least the last 4 years.
Yeah, they have one of the.
They've ranked under Pakistan as a catching team in the slips.
What is the world coming to when Pakistan is like one of the better teams in the world, and especially compared to England when it comes to slip catching? Like that's kind of depressing, quite frankly, from an English perspective.
When India and Pakistan are like two of the best teams in the world at slip catching, and England cannot catch in the slips to save their lives, there is a deep problem in your cricket.
Yeah, and it really starts out with the slip cord, right? We feel like we're being a bit hoarse, shouting ourselves out every time we say this, but England have two major problems with their slip cord. Because
they don't have a slip cord.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they keep on chopping and changing different batsmen, right? And so different batsmen aren't acclimatized to playing in the same position, right? You don't have a designated first or second slip that is consistently played there and practiced there a lot.
Importantly than that, England is setting up their slips differently from a lot of other teams, in that England's slips are very flat and very deep.
Yeah, especially for their bowlers.
It's almost negative in how you're setting your slip cord, right? Like when you look at other teams, like there are basically two ways of doing it. You have the Australian method, which is used by teams like South Africa and New Zealand,
yeah.
And that's how they set their slips, right? And then you sort of have this Indian method, which is used by countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to an extent. Sri Lanka uses it, and West Indies use it as well. But the slips are flatter, right? And they're more spaced out, so they cover more ground, but they also have depth. England said, no, we're not doing any of that. We're just gonna have a flat line that like points towards point. It's like, what's the point of any of it?
And it's way too far back, right? That's the other real criticism.
You're not taking any catches. Like third slip is not gonna catch. Why is third slip even there? At one point, when Ollie Robinson had a fantastic spell in this innings, right?
Right.
They had like 5 slips in. Yeah. I would say about 3 of them had a legitimate chance of catching the ball.
Yeah.
That's Ollie Robinson. He's the guy with the most bounce on this English team.
Yeah, he has the third highest release point, of all seamers in world cricket currently, right? When he actually deserves it. So he gets amongst the most amount of bounce of any seamer. But, you talk about that, right? And it comes down to a couple of factors there as well, right? Josh Butler is not, a pure glovesman's wicketkeeper, right?
Right. He's not England's best option as a glovesman. He's a talented player. He's fine as a backup. But they really need Ben Foakes in the squad.
Yeah, and they need him because Ben Foakes, right, or the captain, right? The captain takes some responsibility in it as well. You could have if you had your slips of, you have to adjust your slips, right, in the context of where you're going to. Yes, the Gabba is a bit of a bouncy wicket, but your seamers aren't as, tall and pacey as compared to the Australian seamers, right? And you could see that there were moments there, right, where, like, for instance, Mark Wood, who was bowling serious heat. I'm talking about 150 Ks. He was touching that line.
Yeah, his first 2 spells were over 150, and his next 2 were over 145.
Yeah. If the ball is dying to your keeper, when a guy, yes, he's short and skinny, but if he's bowling it at a short of a length or a back of a length, and it's dying towards your keeper, there's something wrong, right? You shouldn't have that on a relatively bouncy-ish wicket be the case. So it is on the onus of the keeper and, who often tells the slips sometimes or advises the slips where to stand, or the captain, who, also has sort of control over that, to say, what, guys, we need to move a little bit, closer. And somebody who's more of an experienced hand, like Ben Foakes, could actually do that.
Right, and of course, and the other advantage that Ben Foakes has is that he's a really good keeper. So that means that you can space your wicket, you can space out the rest of your side more.
Exactly, exactly, and it cost them, right? Like Burns is dropped. Again, is a sign of the inexperience in that sport, and just a
And
bunch
Burns
of
is a good slipper, by the way. He's not a bad slip fielder, and I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that he doesn't trust the guy next to him to go for the ball.
despite all of that, right? They got themselves into a good position at 195 for 5, or a relatively good one, so to speak. Ollie Robinson came back, bowled a really good spell.
Yep.
Steve Warner with a
Mark
slow
Wood
ball.
was brilliant in support in that spell.
Yeah, but they couldn't seize on the advantage because they just didn't take the opportunities in the field. But then the other factor that I also think is very important of noting, right, from an England bowling perspective, you heard the term used a lot around, right, that England were very unlucky in this match. And yes, we talked about some reasons as to why they were unlucky.
Yeah, if your fielder's dropping catches as a bowler, you're justified to feel a little bit hard done by.
Yeah, if it's justified to feel hard done, there were some no balls that that entire Ben Stokes no ball saga, where they didn't call no balls that should have been called because they didn't have a machine to do so, and he got a wicket off a delivery that then they finally called a no ball. I can see an argument for why that you feel unlucky with that. But the other reason why they didn't take as many wickets or weren't as effective also just boils down to the fact that they didn't bowl that just a tiny bit fuller, right? Because in Australia, right, it is very easy, especially in conditions like this where the ball was doing a bit, right? It is very easy to go ooh and ah at deliveries that beat the bat, or that pass the bat or bounce out of nowhere and trouble the bat, right? And to some extent that is good bowling. But what you really want to look for, especially in a match situation like this, you're 150 all out. You need to take wickets. The only way you're going to get back into this match, you need to
pitch it up.
You have to pitch it up. And critically, right, the one bowler who did probably the best job of all of that was Robinson, especially in that second spell where he took 2 or 3 wickets for nothing, where with Green and Warner and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. What was one characteristic thing about Robinson compared to all the other English bowlers? He consistently hit.
What's the word? He pitched the ball up.
Yeah, he pitched the ball up. He hit that full of a good length, rather than just the back of a good length. And even Wood, right, who bowled really well. If you look at his length, yes, he's a shorter guy, so he has to compensate and get the length a bit more. But even they just bowled too many deliveries in that 8 meter 10 stump range, or a 7 meter 6 meter 8 stump range, when they really need to bowl around that 5 meter range. It's a small difference, I know. It might seem to a lot of people, but it matters, right? Yeah. Because the other thing is, right, Australian batsmen, especially good Australian batsmen, were brought up on these surfaces, like Marnus Labuschagne, right? He made a 70 and it played really well. What was the one characteristic thing that he did really well in that inning? He left.
Right, left.
And why was he able to leave? Because he knew that a normal delivery that the English bowlers would bowl, that would hit the top of the off field in the Gabba, would actually be something that you could leave because it wouldn't hit the stumps, right? Yeah. And so that's just one of those things, right, where England's pacers just have to do a better job of pitching it up that little bit fuller, right? Because otherwise they're still going to be the same old story. You're going to still have a situation where they'll be unlucky, right? And again, we're saying that there are legitimate reasons for them being unlucky, but they're also
unlucky, but they're also not doing the most that they can do.
But speaking of somebody who did do the most that he could do, and was a huge reason why Australia won this match. Yes, the Cummins 5-4 made it so that England were practically unlikely to win the match at all. But I thought the innings really took it out of their grasp. The
completely seized the momentum of the match, especially after that English fight back.
Yeah, Travis Head. He came in around 195 for 5. So the lead was only 50 above England's score, half the side out. If England bowled well and they caught the catches and the fielding was good and all, they could have easily wrapped up Australia for 300, if not for Travis Head. And it's very important to also look at it from his innings from this perspective, because if you look at the innings itself, right, and if you look at some of the highlights itself, it is a bit of a streaky-ish inning. There's not everything, hit the middle of the bat. There were shots that, they were mistimed and so forth. It was a little bit of a throwing the bat in certain scenarios and so forth, right? I mean,
but it was a very unselfish innings.
Exactly. Because think the context I wanted to get at, right, Rowan, is this guy was on tenterhooks on whether he would be playing the Ashes, right? It was between him and Khwaja. Khwaja has scored runs in the Ashes at home before. Has been very successful.
He's on fire in Shield cricket as well. This is his home ground.
Yeah, and
and he scores. He's been scoring centuries for fun at home. So
yeah, and Head has been in good form too, but not as much as well. There are questions about Head that have been raised about by analysts and so forth, and even the runs that he did score. One of the hundreds came at home against a weak Sri Lankan attack. Another demoralized New Zealand attack, I believe, that he scored runs off of as well to get another 100. So there were questions about Travis Head, right? Leading up to this test match, and it was very important for him to deliver and perform for his own sake to be in the team. But where it was such a noble effort, I think, came down to the fact that the match situation that Australia were in, right? They were looking like they could be a bit on the back foot, right? And they knew that they needed to get runs relatively quickly because rain, as you mentioned to me earlier while we were watching the match.
There was a possibility of rain on day 5 that you could lose a session too, right?
Yeah, and so if you, there was an onus for them to try to get runs as quickly as possible, pile on the agony for the English to put them entirely out of the match, effectively, right? And the pitch was going to get better to bat on as well, very likely.
But it will do that, and then until it very suddenly doesn't.
Yeah, and so there was definitely a lot of impetus where they needed the runs quick, and Head, pretty unselfishly, I might add, was like, you know what, I'm going to go after the bowling. I could get out. I'm taking a lot of risks here, right? But I'm going to go after the bowling. Our team needs a big score, but they need it quick. And we need to get the runs on the board so we have enough time to bowl out England for a second time.
And I would also add that when he went out, it's very clear that he went out to go and hit. Yeah. Because he has a strike rate of over 100 in a test match.
Yeah, he got his 100 of 85 balls or something. It was crazy, And then,
he slowed down after he got 100 because that's when you need to bat sensibly, not the first 50, the next 50.
Yeah. He was also batting the tail. He was having to take more strikes, obviously less chances of rotating strike and so forth. Although he was bashing the ball, I thought it was very, very good innings in that context. And the other thing I liked about that innings, and it'll be relevant when we talk about England's second innings, right? He wasn't satisfied with getting 100. He went on and got 100.
Get more, and that's really what you got to do in Australia.
Yeah.
Once you got 100, you gotta convert that to 150. If you get 150, go for 200.
Yeah. Do not be satisfied with just a 50 or 80 not out, right? You need to do that. And I thought his innings was brilliant. Starc rubbed salt in the wounds as well, smashed it by 34 or something like that.
35.
35. And really, Australia, by the time he was out and by the time the innings was over, right, 425 to England's 147, really, the match was out of England's grasp. They were almost always going to lose at that point. To the English credit, once
they fight back.
Yeah, they fight back, right? Burns doesn't get out on a duck, so moral victory.
He doesn't get on a duck, but he does get a Jaffa from Pat Cummins that takes his wicket when he looked somewhat ominous, honestly. Like in the sense that Rory Burns looks ominous.
Yeah, well, every time he doesn't get dismissed under 10, right? He tends to generally convert into a decent score.
30, 35, 40 runs on the board. That's good enough for him. He'll bat like an hour, so that's great.
Yeah, and he has a habit of getting hundreds as well, right? So
once if he gets past that point, then it's almost certainly he's going to 100.
Yeah, the conversion rate's pretty good in that respect. But I mean, he got a delivery that, as we said, right, like with the moisture in the pitch drying out at this point in day 3, the sun coming in, and the ball having made divots in the pitch, of course, there were indentations, right? And the Cummins delivery that sort of bounced and leaked and just he could only fend it while he was trying to cut, it was too close and awkward for him to do so, and went to the keeper. That was one of those deliveries where, it just was a situation where the indentation started to come out, right? And it got some extra bounce in patches as well, and there was some good carry available. But he battled it out. Hamid battled it out.
I think Hamid really benefited because we were talking about this during the match. Naseem Hameed, unlike every other English batsman, played a significant amount of cricket in an antipodean nation in
Yeah.
New Zealand, and he's credited it with helping him improve his game. And I can see that, like, in the sense that he left the ball,
Yeah.
which is remarkable, right? He didn't try and fend at everything, and he left the ball. He batted sensibly.
Yeah, and he also
Get
another
out.
thing that I was going to point out regarding that, right? That antipodean experience, his ability to play the short ball, particularly with a very lovely timed square cut, right? Which he can time. He plays that shot whereby he can pierce the gap in the field really well, right? He plays it often very straight as well, in the sense that it's a horizontal bat shot that isn't very angled, right? And that's the sort of stroke play that you need in Australia to succeed. You need to be able to punish those deliveries with a very horizontally aligned bat, and he does that really well. So he does that when the ball's a little bit fuller, very full, I should say. He makes sure to punish it, and it goes to the boundary as well. So he has a game that is able to succeed in these conditions. And even though he didn't score that many runs in this match, 25 of pop, really, both innings effectively, he showed that he has the game to succeed in Australia. And he was impressive, although not as impressive, I might add, as David Milan.
Brilliant batting, just brilliant.
Yeah, David Milan, I would argue, even outshown Joe Root in this match in that second innings, right? Both scored 80s. I thought Milan's was excellent in the sense that it comes from a guy who isn't in the form of his life. It's a guy who...
It comes from a guy who is not one of the top four batsmen of his generation.
No, yeah, it doesn't. It comes from that.
It comes from the guy who is the understudy.
Yeah, it also comes from a guy who's old, getting a little bit old in the squad. That question about his, place in the lineup in part as well, just because he, doesn't do well in England because his technique is not oriented largely for English-style pitches, or I should say English-style conditions in a lot of the recent matches, I should add. Obviously, it varies from pitch to pitch. But then I think the other factor with it, right, we're talking about why he doesn't do well in England. That's conversely kind of the reason why he does well in Australia. Because what David Milan is as a batsman, a test batsman, from what I've seen, he's a batsman who likes to hang on the back foot, right? He's a batsman who very much likes to hang on the back foot to get a little bit of extra time to play his particular shots. You'll see even against spinners, he tries to defend them often on the back foot. That is his comfort zone, right? Against pacers, he has a very good hook. I mean, a very good pull, a very good cut, not a hook, I should say. He can drive the ball that's very full to him. And so he is, very much a batsman suited for what we would call prototypical Australian conditions, right? Where you need to be able to play, you need to have a proper back foot game. His trigger movement and his natural way of batting in itself is akin to that. And he showed it today, right? He played the quickies pretty well. Yes, the pitch had flattened out a bit, and Root and him were lucky in that sense. But as we said, there was some inconsistent bounce available. There was some tonal available. He largely played line rolls pretty well. And Root, again, he's adjusted his game to be better on the back foot as well. Both of them showed why England aren't a completely hopeless team.
No. They show that there is promise. And honestly, I was expecting Joe Root, if he made a century, that he would go on and convert that century, in Milan as well. And I was thinking, well, like at the end of day 3, I was like, yeah, well, if these two guys are there by lunch day 4, Australia is in trouble.
The total at the end of day 3 was 222 or something, right? And so, only 50 runs behind, only about like 70 or 80 runs behind the deficit effectively, right? So, if they had gone on to got centuries and one of them got a big century, suddenly you're looking at, okay, these guys might be able to make a fight of this. And
if they're still at the crease, that means that batsmen can bat around them.
Exactly.
Right? You can have Butler come in and bat around it. Ollie Pope can come in and bat around them.
Yeah.
Even Chris Wokes and Ollie Robinson down the order can, hold a bat and bat with them.
Yeah, but it didn't happen. And part of the reason why it didn't happen was because Lyon, who had been camping out and had been dying to get his 400th wicket. Finally got his 400th wicket.
Finally got a chance to avoid having to deal with that. Avoid having to look at that Indian team science shirt that he got.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, thank God, I can ignore that now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And to that point, right? He actually averages pretty poorly on this ground. 73 odd before this match.
Yeah,
and so
the GABA is not particularly friendly to spinners, shall we say?
Not always, right? But I think what he did really well was he exploited the overspin very well. He's always spinner who gets more overspin than side spin. And he did use that very well. He exploited the inconsistency with bounce in the wicket, and he set batsmen up really well, right? And I think the best example of that was the wicket that he got to break the partnership, right? Milan batting pretty comfortably on 80 or 70 odd or so forth, and then suddenly, he decides to, in conjunction with Pat Cummins, to put fielders close in on the wicket, and it works. It messes with the psychology of Milan, because now Milan, who's normally a guy who likes usually staying on the back foot, even to the spinners when defending, is like, okay, if I defend it, it might pop up and one of these close-in fielders might take a catch. So I'm going to have to
go forward, and then I'll defend the ball and go to one of the short close-in fielders for a catch.
Yeah. Or try to throw him on his land, hit him off the to the top of the head, over his top of his head, straight and so forth. And he tried that, but eventually Lyon was too good. Deceived him in the fight. Got that bad pad. The excellent bowling there, and really from there it was a procession, right? 8 for 60 was the collapse.
It was the most English procession I have ever seen. You have this really good batting partnership that, genuinely very, very good. Pardon me. They go from 2 for 61 to 3 for 223. That's a 160-run partnership, and then immediately lose the next 5 wickets from 30 runs. That's not an exaggeration. They go from so Milan gets out at 2 for 3. Root gets out 6 runs later. Pope gets out 8 runs later. Stokes gets out 20 runs after 22. No, sorry, 32 runs after Pope. So it's like, why? What's wrong with you, England?
Yeah, and again, credit has to be given to the Australian bowlers. Pat Cummins again, accurate as possible, getting the ball to rear up. Got again.
I'm not taking away from the Australians. I'm just like, come on, England, you have to be playing better than that.
Yeah, they just don't know how to capitalize on big moments, and that's the batting is too frail, effectively, right? But again, Lyon, I think he ended up taking 4 wickets. And I thought those were well deserved. I honestly thought he deserved a 5 buck, because even when that partnership was going on between Root and Milan, right? Even when they scored that 150 odd plus, right, 160. He kept on beating the bat, and he kept on getting bounced on edges and so forth. And he kept on bowling really tight, right? He deserved those wickets, and he really persisted very well. And I thought it was just rewards for him. The other person who I thought did come to the party a little bit as well, picked up 2 wickets. Cam Green, I thought he bowled much better in the second innings than the first, and I thought there's a lot of potential with this.
Again, he got a big wicket too, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he got Joe Root.
Yeah. And the other thing is, right, the other thing about Cam Green that I thought was impressive, right, he didn't get the new ball initially. He was bowling over 70 to 80, right? And he still managed to get a couple of them to swing, not by a lot, just to hold its line.
It was just really, really good bowling.
He
didn't rely on just trying to bounce guys out, because again, when you are that tall as a fast bowler, it is very tempting to go and try to bounce people out. No,
because you see the ball flying and get the keeper taking it
over his head, jumping.
Yeah, it's very tempting, and he has the pace to do it too. Not a slow coach by any means. He bowls 135 to 140 with his height. That's enough to get out.
But you can bounce people out with that, but he didn't. He bowled a good line and focused on his line and got wickets.
Yeah, and critically, he the fact that he was able to get outswing, right?
Hey, what's wrong with you, England?
Yeah, and I mean, again, credit has to be given to the Australian bowlers. Pat Cummins again, accurate as possible, getting the ball to rear up. Got again.
I'm not taking away from the Australians. I'm just like, come on, England. You have to be playing better than that.
Yeah, they just don't know how to capitalize on the big moments, and that's what the batting is too frail, effectively, right? But again, Lyon, I think, he ended up taking 4 wickets, and I thought those were well deserved. I honestly thought he deserved a 5 because even when that partnership was going on between Burns and Milan, right? Even when they scored that 150 odd plus, right, 160. He kept on beating the bat, and he kept on getting bounced on edges and so forth. And he kept on bowling really tight, right? He deserved those wickets, and he really persisted very well. And I thought it was just rewards for him. The other person who I thought did come to the party a little bit as well, picked up 2 wickets. Cam Green, I thought he bowled much better in the second innings than the first, and I thought there's a lot of potential with this.
Again, he got a big wicket too, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he got Joe Root.
Yeah. And the other thing is, right, the other thing about Cam Green that I thought was impressive, right, he didn't get the new ball initially. He was bowling like over 70 to 80, right? And he still managed to get a couple of them to swing, not by a lot, just to hold its line.
And it was just really, really good bowling.
Yeah,
he didn't rely on just trying to bounce guys out, because again, when you are that tall as a fast bowler, it is very tempting to go and try to bounce people out. No,
because you see the ball flying and get the keeper taking it
over his head.
Yeah,
jumping.
Yeah, it's very tempting, and he has the pace to do it too. Right? Not a slow coach by any means. He bowls 135 to 140 with his height. That's enough to get bounced.
But you can bounce people out with that, but he didn't. He bowled a good line and length, focused on his line and length, got wickets.
Yeah, and critically, the fact that he was able to get outswing, right, relatively latish outswing. It didn't do much. Again, only held its line effectively, just a little bit, but he was able to get outswing from over 70 to 80, right? That's a sign that the guy can be very useful as a 15. Because if your 15 was able to swing it, right?
Yeah. And in Australia's case, because they only play 4 bowlers, he's an excellent option as a 5th bowling option. It makes a lot of sense to have him in the squad, and I think that if Australia is smart, they manage his workload effectively. They use him in situations that help him and help the team. Right? Don't use him as a donkey. Use him as a guy who can come in and bowl good line, good length. Possibly take him 1 or 2 wickets in an inning, right? And just help clean things up.
Yeah. No, I think he has a very bright future ahead of him, especially with Pat Cummins, who, on the evidence of this match, at least, I think is utilized pretty well. So, but England all out for 290 odd, and they leave what can only be considered an academic target for Australia to chase in the 4th innings.
Ollie Robinson does his best, though. He tries, and it doesn't work, but he tries.
He tries. He gets 1 wicket.
It is out scary, so it's like it doesn't really count.
Yeah, the guy was a debutant.
A debutant.
And then who every half the Australians I meet are bracking. Because they're like, nah, Josh Inglis would be so much better if he played. Why is this loser playing?
This is clearly just because Warney's been lobbying for him for months.
Yeah, but he gets out. He gets out cheaply. But really, 19 runs to get, right? Endless time to get them. You're gonna win the match.
Hey, what's wrong with you, England?
Yeah, and I mean, again, credit has to be given to the Australian bowlers. Pat Cummins again, accurate as possible, getting the ball to rear up. Got again.
I'm not taking away from the Australians. I'm just like, come on, England. You have to be playing better than that.
Yeah, they just don't know how to capitalize on the big moments, and that's the batting is too frail, effectively, right? But again, Lyon, I think, he ended up taking 4 wickets, and I thought those were well deserved. I honestly thought he deserved a 5 because even when that partnership was going on between Burns and Milan, right? Even when they scored that 150 odd plus, right, 160. He kept on beating the bat, and he kept on getting bounced on edges and so forth. And he kept on bowling really tight, right? He deserved those wickets, and he really persisted very well. And I thought it was just rewards for him. The other person who I thought did come to the party a little bit as well, picked up 2 wickets. Cam Green, I thought he bowled much better in the second innings than the first, and I thought there's a lot of potential with this.
Again, he got a big wicket too, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he got Joe Root.
Yeah. And the other thing is, right, the other thing about Cam Green that I thought was impressive, right, he didn't get the new ball initially. He was bowling like over 70 to 80, right? And he still managed to get a couple of them to swing, not by a lot, just to hold its line.
And it was just really, really good bowling.
Yeah,
he didn't rely on just trying to bounce guys out, because again, when you are that tall as a fast bowler, it is very tempting to go and try to bounce people out. No,
because you see the ball flying and get the keeper taking it
over his head.
Yeah,
jumping.
Yeah, it's very tempting, and he has the pace to do it too. Not a slow coach by any means. He bowls 135 to 140 with his height. That's enough to get out.
But you can bounce people out with that. But he didn't. He bowled a good line and length, focused on his line and length, got wickets.
Yeah, and critically, the fact that he was able to get outswing, right, relatively latish outswing. It didn't do much. Again, only held its line effectively, just a little bit. But he was able to get outswing. From over 70 to 80, right? That's a sign that the guy can be very useful as a 15. Because if your 15 was able to swing it, right?
Yeah. And in Australia's case, because they only play 4 bowlers, he's an excellent option as a 5th bowling option. It makes a lot of sense to have him in the squad. And I think that if Australia is smart, they manage his workload effectively. They use him in situations that help him and help the team. Right. Don't use him as a donkey.
Yeah.
Use him as a guy who can come in and bowl good line, good length. Possibly take him 1 or 2 wickets in an inning.
Yeah.
Right? And just help clean things up.
Yeah. No, I think he has a very bright future ahead of him, especially with Pat Cummins, who, on the evidence of this match, at least, I think he's utilized him pretty well. So, but England all out for 290 odd, and they leave what can only be considered an academic target for Australia to chase in the 4th innings.
Ollie Robinson does his best, though. He tries, and it doesn't work, but he tries.
He tries. He gets 1 wicket.
It is out scary, so it's like it doesn't really count.
Yeah, the guy was a debutant.
A debutant.
And then who every half the Australians I meet are bracking. Because they're like, nah, Josh Inglis would be so much better if he played. Why is this loser playing?
This is clearly just because Warney's been lobbying for him for months.
Yeah, but he gets out. He gets out cheaply. But really, 19 runs to get, right? Endless time to get them. You're gonna win the match. Takeaways, right? My first takeaway really is, if we're talking about the English bowlers. Root set better fields for them,
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's
just set better fields, man.
Especially with your spinner, captain.
Yeah, especially with a spinner, because if you're gonna play your spinner, right, and he's already coming into the form undercooked, the worst thing you can do is set him a field where he's gonna get thumped around a bit. Lose all of his confidence. Yeah, because they need that spinner option, right? They might not need an Adelaide. They might go with 5 paces in Adelaide. They need a spinner in the SCG. They need one in the MCG. There's a flat wickets usually. There's some turn and offer with them. You need a spinner to bowl sides out on day 4 and day 5. And you have to manage your spinner a little bit better. And in set fields that are better that are suited better. Sort of lines that they have in the bowl in particular. Just a lack of imagination in the captaincy, I would say. And that seeps through the field placement.
You don't have to be a super aggressive captain, but within a certain range, there needs to be a little bit of aggression.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, from an English bowling perspective, again, just a minor thing to work off with, but be aware and cognizant of when the pitch has some moisture in it, right? There is a very good chance that you're going to have indentations that come up over the course of the match as the pitch dries out, like we were sort of discussing earlier, right? I don't think Australia did this per se intentionally, but they certainly did end up hitting the indentations much more often than England. That was in part why, yes, they told the bowlers to get extra bounce, but that was in part why they were getting the ball to rear up more often than England. Because England had taller bowlers on their disposal too. Ollie Robinson and all those sort of things. But I occasionally felt that they didn't look at those indentations in the pitch and try to test the Australian batsmen out there and create that doubt in their mind, right? And so that would be something strategically. Don't alter your line of length entirely, but strategically use that to your advantage.
Yeah, use the variable bounce.
From an Australian perspective, right, the one thing I would say is that they definitely, have had a really great match. With the one thing that could be mentioned as a takeaway for them to keep in mind going forward, Hazelwood did get injured in this particular match, and it's not something that you can necessarily plan for, right? With
right. No one plans to lose a seamer or have a player injured.
But definitely do a better job of rotating your seamers throughout the series, right?
Yeah, I also think that holds for England as well. I mean, Mark Wood bowled the most overs of any of the English seamers.
And yes, he was, partially had to do that because Stokes was injured halfway through the match. Robinson got tired of it in a spell as well, so he struggled with it a little bit. But when your quickest bowler, right, with Mark Wood, which is English's quickest bowler, is bowling the most amount of overs in a match, that is a bit of a sign of concern. I know the group managed him better with 3 over short spells throughout the day, scattered throughout the day, but still, you shouldn't be bowling that guy that much.
Honestly, and I think one thing that the English can take away from how the Australians bowl is just treat Mark Wood sort of like they treat Mitch Starc.
Yeah.
He's a different kind of bowler, but they have a similar sort of workload management regime that you can use.
Yeah.
And sort of my final takeaway from the match is that just kind of need to score runs. It seems kind of obvious, but you win a test match, you win cricket when you have runs on the board.
Yeah, you do.
England's problem for the last 3 years has been they cannot put runs on the board.
No, they can't. And critically, right, coming back to the point of in Australia needing to score big, the 2 batsmen who top scored for England in this match, right? Their scores were 80 odd, right? Both of them, Root and Milan. Australia had 1 top score of 150 plus.
Yeah.
That's the difference between winning in Australia and losing, because the pitches can be good for batting here and can give you bounce and pace, so you can score and play shots and occupy the crease and not have to worry about being particularly sluggish, right? You can score for long periods of time. Bat for long periods of times in Australia and score pretty appropriately, right? And for me, I think the biggest disappointment for Root as a personal player in this match will be that he didn't go on to get a big 100, right? He has had a record here in Australia where he got 550s in the last series that he toured, right? 2017.
Again, that's not bad. It's just not what you need.
Right, because what happened in that series? They still lost 4-0, right? It
took Alistair, and they should have been whitewashed. It just took Alistair Cook playing a fantastic final innings in Australia.
Yeah, he scored a 200, and that was the one match that actually England managed to not lose in that entire series. There's a lesson.
What does that tell you?
Yeah, it tells you. It tells you very much, right? That if England need to win, they're heavily reliant on Root and Milan. The rest of the batsmen are a bit shaky.
Either they're very inexperienced, they're not very good, or they're opening batsmen, in which case you can't really rely on them.
Or in the case of Stokes, as we said, they're coming back from an extended absence of the game. There's no guarantee on how they do. But the batsmen who they can trust, Root, and they are relying on, no question about it, to carry that batting line, right? When he gets a score, he has to make it a big one. He just has to, because there is no way for the rest of the batsmen to bat around him, and there is no way for them effectively to win against what is, quite frankly, a better side in the condition if a Root colossus does not occur.
Mr. Root, you're our only hope.
Yeah. But speaking of England's other big hope, which is the one match they think they can win in this series.
They got 2 now because of
Hobart, but initially 1.
But this is the match that they had already planned. This is the match we're going to win.
Yeah.
As they do every time they play a day-nighter.
Yeah. And that is the Adelaide Test match in here, the day-nighter. The pitch generally, to protect the pink ball, has a little more grass on it. The pink ball itself does a little bit more in the air, in seam because of the lacquer. And then the period from the transition of daytime to night is often one where a lot of wickets fall. Jimmy Anderson took a 6-4 during that period. The ball was very difficult to see from a visibility standpoint for the batsman, right? And going into this, obviously, they're going to bring back Broad and Anderson. Broad's decision to not play in this match was criticized by many. He would have probably bowled a little bit better than Wilkes, I reckon, as well. But they've made it clear that they were saving both of them up for the day-nighter. So expectations will be there for them to deliver. Australia, with Hazelwood out, now they have Jai Richardson, who's been announced into the squad. And they're going to be relying on him a lot in those conditions, because again, it's kind of, he's the closest to sort of the English kind of seamer in the Australian bowling lineup, so they'll rely on him with the new ball to do a good job. But I just want to have a word of caution here, right?
Yeah, can I add one as well?
Yes, please do. Okay. I think it's going to be the same as mine.
England hypes itself up every time they see day-night test. Every time. It doesn't matter where it is. They think day-night test, we have Jimmy Anderson, we have Stuart Broad, we'll swing these guys out, and we'll just win. Right? Because that is what England does. Because they have this mindset that they are the best team in the world at day-night tests. Despite them never having played a whole day-night test ever.
Well, they played one in Edgbaston, but it was against the Windies. Kind of.
Oh yeah, they did.
And they kind of knocked them out because the Windies were at their lowest ebb as a team. Period. Yeah. At that point.
But like this English team just doesn't play day-night tests. But for some reason, they think that they are the greatest day-night test team in the history of cricket.
And it comes down to this idea that the English team in general, right, has genuine confidence in what they think are more English-like conditions, right? But when the ball is giving you that lateral movement, right, and the bounce isn't as exaggerated, they think, okay, these are English-like conditions. We know how to bowl, and this will do well. But here's the thing, man.
They don't.
I don't know if they notice this. They
lose these matches because their batsmen can't bat. The problem is that they just don't produce good enough batsmen to exploit that advantage. So, yeah, I'm like, okay, you seem very confident in the fact that you can win this match, despite all of the evidence suggesting that is not the case.
No, but it is something that they're going to have to, try to take some confidence in this match, because it is a do-and-die match, right? If England lose 2-0, seriously,
that's the Ashes. Let's be honest. They're not going to win the. They're not going to win the Boxing Day Test. They're not going to win the SCG Test. They might win Hobart, but
yeah. But if you lose Adelaide, it's pretty much done and dusted. Right?
You're done. Just go home.
Yeah, and just from an Australian standpoint, again, fantastic first match for them. Apart from maybe Harris, all the questions that they had, right, over certain players have been answered, and yeah, I mean, just
honestly, if they want to find a replacement for Harris, maybe not for this match, right, but for the next one after this, Usman Quadra's still in the squad.
Yeah, and he bats in the top order. So I mean, they even the situations where they have gaps and flaws, right? They have
solutions in the squad to help resolve those problems.
Right, and so my prediction, with all of those factors considered, going into Adelaide, I do think Australia. But all things considered, we'd still be excited for that match. The ball doesn't going to do it. Adelaide's always a great ground.
Yeah,
stadium.
I mean, it is by far the most fun Australian wicket.
Yeah,
Australian ground.
Yeah, and so we'll be in tune for that. So you guys stay tuned for that, and we'll see you when the second Ashes test is done and dusted to give our thoughts.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
You guys.